For those of you who are concerned about whether Matt Campbell will be a Cyclone next year, myself included, I've got some very good news for you today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for making this your first listen or watch every single day. I couldn't appreciate it enough. Wherever you're listening or watching, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Got a lot to talk about today. We're kind of going around the horn with football kicking it off. Then we'll talk men's basketball, a little bit of mentality going on there. It's one of my favorite things to do with TJ. And then to round things out, our preview of Arizona for the women's basketball team before we dive into this glorious weekend we have upcoming. But before we do, first things first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets and game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, here we go. Let's dive right on into it. You see the portal chatter at the bottom there. You see what's going on. We're talking football right away today on this fine Friday. And I started off the episode by saying, I think this is good news if you're a fan of Matt Campbell staying at Iowa State, and that is because you see it over there on the left, or I guess my left. You're right. Tamatoa McDonough is coming to Iowa State from Yale. And why is this important as far as Matt Campbell goes? That's not what this segment's about, but I would just like to justify that statement. I don't think that players we're targeting out of the transfer portal would be declaring or signing or whatever it is with Iowa State if there was a major question mark at the head coach position. Like, that seems like that's something, if I were in the transfer portal, I'd be like, well, I'd like to know who your coach is. I feel like that's pretty important, especially when you weigh how much Matt Campbell has done for the Cyclones in the last few years, obviously. So I do think this is a good sign. But that being said, let's break down McDonough. I'm going with that. And who is he? What has he done? And how is he going to help the Cyclones? Well, let's start right there. How is he going to help the Cyclones? He's a defensive end. He's going to fill that hole, and that hole is massive. We got 5 guys that will be missing from the defensive end room next year in comparison to what we had this year. I feel like that's a pretty solid number. 5 guys. Excuse me. Obviously, we've got 2 graduating, J.R. Singleton and Joey Peterson. Shout out to you guys getting that diploma big time. I mean, that's awesome. And nothing better than an Iowa State grad, that's for sure. Then we have 3 guys that are jumping in the portal as well. Obviously, Tyler Onyedim is one of the biggest names that we've talked about. Ended up going to A&M, so happy for him. Trent Jones II and Kennard Snyder are the other 2 names. I know we've talked about this. I know that this is common knowledge. I'm just prefacing the fact, getting the names in front of you to make you realize that there are 5 dudes that are not going to be on this team at the defensive end position this coming year that were on it this last year. So that's a pretty big hole to fill. And administration, Matt Campbell, went after Tamatoa McDonough out of Yale. Why? Because he's a dog. I mean, let's take a look here. Led the Ivy League this last year with 6.5 sacks. That's awesome. And then I also see that he had at least 1 sack in each of his last 5 games. Talk about ending the year strong. Led Yale to a 7-3 record on the year. And I went for, where do they play these bowl games? You got to remember, Ivy League doesn't play bowl games. That might be changing next year with the whole FCS deal that they've got going on. But I'm not going to speak on that. It's just they did not play a bowl game this year. They went 7-3. Tamatoa himself is 6'5", 263 pounds. He has 1 year of eligibility remaining. He'll be transferring as a grad student, ran out of eligibility at Yale. He's from North Carolina, Asheville to be specific, and made the all Ivy League second team. As far as other transfer portal things we have going on before we kind of round it back out, we have 5 other offers out currently. And, Remember, the portal is closed for players to enter, but they can still commit. So there is still another defensive tackle, defensive end. Then you got Yamatoa, who this is all per Cyclone Fanatic. You can find this online as well. Keontae Bradley, corner, and then Crew Wakely, safety. And so we're definitely targeting, obviously, the defense, but then more specifically the defensive line. And I think that's a very smart move, especially when you look at how many people are going to be leaving that defensive front. 5 guys. It's unbelievable. That is actually crazy. So that's a big hole to fill. And I like this this target for the front office, and then the signing, therefore, for Tamatoa a lot. I was actually pretty nervous. We weren't making enough noise in the portal up until this point. If you know, we've obviously signed 4 dudes: Chase Sowell, Xavier Townsend, both wide receivers out of UCF and East Carolina, and then Cannon Butler out of UNI. Trey Bell, the DB out of Lindenwood, and then I actually didn't even remember another defensive end. It was kind of after that initial 4-man, bing, 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 Vontre Malone out of Tulsa. We did talk about him, but another, defensive addition. So we'll have Cannon Butler out of UNI, who stepped up his production in a big way, and Vontre Malone out of Tulsa, and then Trey Bell on the defensive side. 2 dogs at wide receiver. We might be murdering the transfer portal. I mean, are you kidding me? I did take a look at Tamatoa's career stats year to year, and we go from 27 tackles, 27, 22 of them being solo this year to 12 last year. So we're seeing a massive jump. I am a big fan of Iowa State targeting these guys. Hey, you make a jump, boom. Let's take a look at the tape. Let's see if you fit the system, have a few maybe phone conversations, bing, bang, boom, pow. Welcome to Ames, my friend. And so I do think that this is a great signing. I also think the target of the front office of Matt, well, I'm calling it a front office, but that's kind of what I guess college sports has become, of Matt Campbell and company, to go for that defensive side of the ball. I think we've got our guys in Chase Sowell and Xavier Townsend, and then obviously guys coming from the roster we currently have. I think at wide receiver we're okay. Running back, I know where we're kind of standing there. Rocco returning. Let's get the defensive side fixed. Let's get it figured out. Make it so we don't have to score 45 points a game. I realistically, defensive end is going to be a major problem because it was kind of a problem this year. So Cannon Butler, Vontre Malone, and now Tamatoa McDonough hopefully will bolster this defensive line. And in a way that, to me, the biggest thing we need to see is pass rush, essentially. I don't need to see a sack per se, but I need to see we're forcing the quarterback to make decisions quicker than he would have normally. That's how I evaluate a pass rush. Are you putting stress on the quarterback, making him make movement in the pocket, and are you making him make decisions quicker than normal? 6.5 sacks, 5 or at least 1 per game in the last 5 games. That's a good look. That is a good look. And second team all Ivy League also going to help. And then you add Cannon Butler from UNI and Vontre Malone from Tulsa, 6'6", 6'3", and 6'5". To that front, 240, 241, and 263. I like where we're at. It seems like we're going for a little bit of a win now mentality when you look at the amount of years remaining on this defensive end or defensive line front. A lot of 1 year remainings. Malone out of Tulsa will have 2 years, but Butler and McDonough with only 1 year remaining. But I don't mind it. I do not hate it. With Rocco, I don't want to call it like a championship window, but he's a really good quarterback. Let's try to make the most we can out of such a great quarterback. And defense is going to help. What do they say? Defense wins championships. So let's just take that into account. That being said, the men's basketball team will be looking to bring home a championship of their own. How are they going to get this done? They're going a bit unconventional, and I'll break that down coming up right after this. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by making you a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. There no more waiting for answers, no more wondering if you're missing out on deductions, whether you've got one form or 20. TurboTax Experts gives your taxes the undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to turbotax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. The Iowa State men's basketball team is on an historic run, and something seems to be a little bit different. I've noticed it. I haven't been able to put my finger on it. We've actually talked about it, and I didn't know exactly what it was. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And let's talk about what is TJ Otzelberger doing differently with this team to elevate it above the rest. In my opinion, this is genius. Okay. I'm a huge fan of hockey, so I'm obviously a little bit impartial. But the substitution mentality that TJ Otzelberger is taking with this team is just genius. It seems to be working. I would go so far as to say this is the future of men's college basketball, but I don't think that every team can handle this, and maybe this team is just destined for greatness. Actually, scratch that. I know they are. That being said, what is he doing? What is TJ Otzelberger doing that is different than what we are used to? Obviously, we've got our starters. Okay, the 5 guys on the floor that are just dogs. Okay, I don't need to name them all, but Lipsy, Gilbert, Jefferson. There's 5 of them. But quickly into these games, TJ Otzelberger is swapping out 3 of those starters for a Curtis Jones, Nate Heise, and of course, Brandon Chatfield. Why is that different, though? Well, he's not waiting for immediate timeout. He's getting these guys in quickly. Now, what's so different about that? He was asked today, as far as I know, on the date, are you sure that this is the right move? You're not allowing your players to get into a rhythm. They're not able to feel out the game. And he almost countered by saying, well, I feel like our guys are able to pick up the game in that amount of time. And then this is where he goes into why is this the right move? And this is what I think, like I have said it over and over, when this guy gets behind a mic, you need to turn your ears on. Okay, he's awesome. Before I get into what he said, I just need to make sure it's very clear. What is essentially happening here is he is turning over substitutions quicker than normal. It's a 2.5, it's a 3-minute stint. Then we're swapping people in, swapping people out. Okay, you got Nate Heise, who's kind of that, I would almost argue, can play a guard or a center. They're not really putting him at center, but you know what I mean. He's kind of a utility guy. And then Jones is that kind of guard and scoring threat. And then Brandon Chatfield is kind of that center rebounder, assist kind of guy. So they've got almost like the perfect lineup for something like this to go down. But when asked about it, he said, we demand such high effort from not only our guards, but also the 4 and the 5 that, and then he gave examples, rim to rim, just sprinting the entire floor when you're screening, getting back behind the defense, defending the screen, all of these types of situations that just require high effort. He's like, it's tough to play more than 2.5, 3 minutes. There's a little bit of talk of like only 2.5 minutes at a time. Then the guys get out on the floor and then boom, we're 2.5 minutes in. And I'm like, can I sit? He didn't say that, but that's just kind of how I'm interpreting it. It's essentially what he said, just in different words. As hard and physically as they need to play. And then he mentioned specifically, which is kind of something we've talked about over and over, Tamin Lipsy. I mean, his contribution to this team is obviously seen on the score sheet at times. You look at their last game with 20 points. I'd say that made a difference. But at times it can be seen just only through the eye test, essentially. Maybe 4 points, assist, maybe a steal, a couple free throws, something like that. But he's just going to the wall constantly over and over and over. And so TJ mentions, the effort, energy, and physicality that Taman Lipsey plays with is you have to have those sort of breaks. Now, why do I mention hockey at the beginning of this segment? This is how hockey kind of approaches it. If you're not a huge fan of hockey, I'm not here to break it down for you. I'm not a great teacher. I just speak into a microphone. But essentially, they have like these things that are called lines or groups of guys that go out every 2.5, 3 minutes or so, kind of towards the end of that glycolytic system, if you're familiar. And they try to maximize the amount of effort they can get in a short amount of time, and then they get off the ice and they let the next group of guys go in. I think this Cyclones team is so deep and they're so versatile, and anybody can be on the floor at any given time, that this is a very strong way to go about it. And also at the same time, I just haven't heard of teams doing this. And I think this is absolutely genius. We've kind of seen this early. We were kind of talking about it a little bit. It's kind of been mentioned, but this was the first time that TJ really sat down and said, hey, look, this is why we're doing it. We are going so hard constantly that you have to be subbed out. And this is not a foreign concept. That's why I bring in the hockey, because this is seen in other sports. Okay. We know that the athletes can recover in enough time that they can swap out quickly like this and give their all at all times. I will be curious to see if this is something we see more moving forward, or is this just kind of this team is capable of doing it? Excuse me. And so maybe this is a mentality thing that we've talked about TJ, we've talked about Matt Campbell and their mentality approach towards the game, why they're different, in my opinion. Maybe this is their coaching towards these players, and that's why it's successful. Maybe it's the actual real lineup of guys, from a Heisey, Brandon Chatfield, and Curtis Jones coming off the bench to the effort that Taman Lipsey gives. You can't count on that much effort from every player that's going to come into the building, which is why I'm apprehensive to say that this would spread league-wide. But I think it's a very interesting approach. Like, you go out there and you just go as hard as you physically can for 2.5, 3 minutes and give it your all, and we'll swap you out. Like, you're going to get tired. We know that, but we'll swap you out, and then you'll come back in, you'll do the same thing. And he also mentioned at the end of that question, kind of the guys know the more impact you have on the game, the more you're going to play, the more minutes you will accumulate. It's not so much about timing, which is why he was like, some games I can't get, they call him Kurt, but I can't get Curtis Jones into the game fast enough. I mean, it's got to be now. And it feels like we've waited too long. And so to round it all back to that comment of the guys haven't had enough time to adjust, he's like, I feel like they have time to adjust. They play so hard that they need to kind of come off the floor, catch a quick breather. They got an 8-man rotation, 8 solid dudes that are all contributing, whether it be on the box score or not. This Cyclone team is special, man. And I think it's in more ways than one, because now we're seeing actually that they, in my opinion, are playing the game almost differently as far as how they're going about substituting. And I don't know. I think it's really, really cool. I like the way that TJ coaches this team and is utilizing the players to kind of their strengths. What are they good at? How can we go about attacking the other teams that we face with what we have in store? And the amount of effort and the amount of energy that these guys bring every day is second to none. And TJ is making the most of that. Of course, they'll be headed down to Texas Tech on Saturday. We previewed that yesterday if you missed it. That'll be a fun one. Look to see if the Cyclones can stay undefeated in conference play. That being said, the women will be looking to extend their win streak against Arizona, and I'm going to be breaking that down coming up right after this. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Visit the website and share betting lines around your team or league. Just visit fanduel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's fanduel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So the men obviously going on a tear. We just talked about that and maybe the coaching mentality. Are they subbing differently than other teams? What's the reason? The women, the women have played an interesting season thus far, but against Arizona State, it seemed like they figured it out. They finally got 5 women with 10 or more points, double-digit scoring, and I think they've got it figured out. It's coming up from Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. They played Arizona State and Sun Devils, but now next on Saturday, they'll be facing Arizona and the Wildcats in Tucson, Arizona. What do we need to look out for? What is going down in this game? Well, 2 big players. 2 big players are obviously, I guess, the focal point in this one, and one potentially more than the other, but really I think they're about the same. First up, we got Bria Cunningham, number 25, plays mostly on the inside. And secondly, Jada Williams, a guard, 5'8". So, okay, 5'8" and 6'4". As far as points per game this season, Cunningham averaging almost 13 and Williams averaging right at about that 12. Currently, it sits directly at 12. And then I watched tape from the Baylor game in which they lost by 5 and the UCF game in which they won by 22. So kind of got both sides of the coin here. Very interesting team here in Arizona. If you haven't seen their highlights or their games, I'd go watch them. Very, very interesting to say the least. The biggest thing that I pulled from this is, one, Cunningham on the inside is a very large emphasis for Arizona. Okay. That is somewhere that they are trying to get the ball actively. That is a very strong point for this team. The other thing is this team is just kind of chaos on wheels. I have decision-making questionable at times, but realistically it comes down to this team is chaos on wheels. Against UCF, 10 seconds left in the first quarter, trying to dribble it up the floor, gets poked away. Different Arizona, I guess offensive player goes into the backcourt, grabs the ball, launches it up over behind her head somehow, trying to advance the ball. There is only 6-7 seconds here, but what a move. Not really sure what we're doing there. UCF picks it off, gets a 3 as the buzzer goes, and then I think it was 15 or 18-10 at that point with that 3. And then almost immediately after, to start the second quarter, Arizona, and I believe it was Jada Williams, actually, don't quote me on it, 3 goes up and then takes a shoulder right to the chin. I mean, just clobbered. We've seen softer hits in college football. And so, I mean, just rocked and drilled it. I don't know what to expect out of this team. I don't. At times, they're very almost ISO. Things will go just off the wire. Things will go completely out of control. And somehow they have a way of harnessing it. They're currently sitting at 11-5, 2-1 in the conference. And, as far as what can Iowa State do, we just have to play our game and be consistent. We need to have at least 3 players in double-digit scoring. I don't want to see this be the Audie Crooks show. I don't know if that's going to work. Emily Ryan with the assist game, obviously going to have to be a point of emphasis. But is that really the best way with her just hammering those? I don't know. I would say probably not. No, why would I say that? Of course, that'd be a smart thing to do. Not really sure why I said that. Maybe points-wise, she shouldn't score every point, but she should be dishing it out, okay? We need to get back to that 5-player with double-digit scoring. I don't know why I said that. I am very sorry. That feels like you should take my microphone away for saying that. That was ridiculous. Of course, we want her to have like 25 assists. But I mean, outside of that, Emily Ryan and Audie Crooks are the two biggest names in this game, but those aren't the only players out on the floor. I mean, we know this, right? Addie Brown is going to have to step up in this one. I'm pulling up the stats from Arizona State because this was such a strong example. But Kelsey Jones, I'll be very interested to see where she falls as far as minutes goes. Had 34. I think we said that was just shy of 5 times her minutes against Utah. So, she only had 4 points in this game against Arizona State, but obviously made her mark, getting to play a full 34 minutes, 1 of 1 from the field. So with a 3 and then a free throw as well. So this is I'll be interested to see what Bill Fennelly does with this team, but they absolutely have to share the rock. 18 assists in this last game. Again, still regretting saying that for some reason Emily Ryan should not be giving out assists. Do not know why I said that. I think I was in the mindset I said points. Rebounding wise, this team, getting rebounds against Arizona is going to be big. I mean, they're just going to get there. So that's going to happen from time to time. And of course, you're going to give up points. That's for sure. But looking at Arizona and what they've been able to do over their last few games, it's to be completely honest, nothing short of impressive. Obviously 11-6, but obviously they lost to Baylor, but only by 5. Then they beat UCF by 22. Relatively close one with Utah. We talked about that. Iowa State, I believe, lost by less points. I don't have those both up right now, but that's maybe we look at that as well. That's a 21-point loss. So maybe that's a good sign for us. But other than that, BYU, they win by 4. Weber State, now we're getting into non-conference, and we don't really care so much about those. To be completely honest, didn't face any ranked opponents in the non-conference schedule there. So still, I mean, this team is good, and they are certainly electric. They just if you watch this game, which I recommend you do, and I will probably as well, you should not look away. You should not ever blink, to be completely honest. Try to get some clothespins. Hold those eyes open. You never know what's going to happen with this Arizona team. And I'm very, very curious to see what Coach Fennelly does with this Iowa State women's team. And can they replicate what they did against Arizona State? Because that is the key to victory for this Iowa State team moving forward. That's what we have to do. It is absolutely what we have to do. We have to share the rock. Because any one team, if they shut down Crooks when she's getting 60% of the points, it's going to be a problem. You're not going to win very many points scoring 40% of the points you generally score. So I'd love to see from this game, at least, even if we don't get the win, I just want to see, can Iowa State spread the rock out? Can we get away from 1 or 2 players scoring every point? That's my goal. That's my what I'm looking for in this game. And we'll talk about that come Monday. Don't you worry. That being said, shout out to you guys for making it to this point in the episode. If you're still here, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all it's Cyclone State. And to quote Drake Toll, so I got to keep my job. Until next time, Cyclone fans. Sayonara.